Blessings and welcome, everybody, to another meeting of the B'nai Noach Connection with Israel. And thank you for being with us. This is Pesach Sherbow, and I got my co-host, Terry Hayes, as always, from Tennessee. How you doing, Terry? And in the room right now are Troy, Thomas, oh yeah, Scotty, Veronica, and Devorah. Thank you for joining us this week. The date here in Israel is the 15th of August, 2015. So I guess it's the 14th where in the USA where you guys are. You know, we really enjoy getting together with everybody. And we like when you use the chat room and it's connected here to Zoom, and you can type in questions, or you can say, Terry's monitoring it. Somebody wants to say something, they raise their hand. I don't know how they do that. You raise your hand or something? I don't know. I guess you're watching, Terry.
Yeah, it pops up when there's evidently, I think here at the bottom, there's somewhere here it says raise your hand. And
oh, okay.
It'll pop up at the bottom, so, you know, somebody has their hand raised, and then I'll let.
All right. Thank you guys for being with us. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to be talking over the next however many weeks it takes about the 7 universal laws, where they come from, and we're going to call them categories. The 7 universal categories of what God wants from us, because under each one, there are other things that are required of us. And I've kind of charted out a list, and it's pretty big. I'll preface it by saying everybody knows about the 613. But most Jewish people, nobody can do the 613. There's about 250, 260 that hit you in everyday life. All the stuff for the temple, nobody can do right now. There's no holy temple. The laws about the sacrifices and all that kind of stuff, it just doesn't exist today, so we don't have to worry ourselves with it. But what God focuses on is us just being a good person, how we treat other people, how we look at other people, and how we treat Him. And this is the main thing that we talk about. This tells us how to be a human being in a proper manner, the way God created us in His image. These are the 7 universal laws. So we're going to be going over them, but there's some things we have to say first, because you have to do it with the proper mindset. You can't do it with the mindset you're going to use coming in from any other religion, or if you're in no religion, you can't use it on that mindset. I call it the Greco-Roman Western mindset. I don't know what it's really called. But it's a different way of thinking. And I'm going to show you how to change your way of thinking so you can hear what God has to say, because it's really important to do it. Now, I'm going to say something, and people, when I say it, hello, Carla, good to see you.
Hey, sorry I'm late. There's a storm down here.
Well, we could use a little rain here and cool us down. About thinking, I always tell people, don't think. My wife gets mad. She says, there's no way you can't think. Everybody thinks all day long. I said, yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. When I say don't think, don't ever start a sentence with I think it says or it means this and such, that God means this or God means that. I think. Because you're probably going to get it wrong. You see, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, was created by God as His plan for eternity. Everything we ever wanted to know is right there, written. And then we have the oral Torah, which we studied. He gave us over a period of 40 years in the desert before we went across the Jordan and went into the land of Canaan, on how to do certain things. And in some things He said, okay, here's what I want you to do. You figure out how to do it. You know how I think in this particular manner. We really don't, but he left it to us. However we decide to do it is okay with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given us the freedom to decide what to do.
And that point right there really trips up a lot of people coming from some of the former religions.
That is true.
They come to the attitude, well, if my pastor is wrong, how can I trust this rabbi? How do I know what he's telling me is the truth? That's what you see a lot. And so that, because of what some of us have been through, it may not be just the thinking, but there's a hindrance, like a stumbling block is put in the way of learning how to correctly think in a way, if I'm saying that correct.
You're saying it beautifully. Hello, Angela. Good to see you. Did I say at the beginning of the program, did I say we have Troy and Thomas and Angela and Carla and Deborah and Veronica and Scotty and company? I should say Mr. and Mrs. Scotty with us generally. What you said is absolute truth. You see, God tells us things so we don't have to think about those things. We just accept them. The minute somebody says, well, I think it's this way, or I think it's that way about God's word, they've already gotten away from God's word. Someone can start a sentence, in my opinion, it's this way, but that means it's limited to your little opinion, my opinion. If it's opinion that I'm going to give you, I'll tell you this is my opinion, but otherwise I'm going to be teaching you what I learned from someone else who learned from someone else who learned from someone else. Now, there's the way to study when you're reading it is you must, this is so important, you must put aside any previous teachings you've had outside of the universal laws of mankind and the commandments that God gave. You have to stop it. The minute your mind goes to, well, I learned it this way, you have to stop yourself. You're relearning something. When you go sit in a class to learn something at university or even in high school or junior high school, you learn. You don't think about it. You learn. You learn what you're being taught. And you don't, well, I don't think so. Maybe it's this way. Maybe it's that way. Let me rate it. Let me make up my own mind. Come on. 2 and 2 is 4. You're going to make up your own mind if that's true or not. Get serious. And the Torah is exactly the same way. Now, having said that, when something is written in the Torah is written in a very special language and a very special way. I read in a post the other day that someone claimed that there's a redundancy in some of the verses in the Torah. And one of them, he took an example from Genesis that everybody spoke the same language and said the same thing or something like that. And he claimed it's redundant. Well, that's a good way to think if you're analyzing human beings' writings and words. But God is never, ever, ever redundant. When you pick up a Tanakh and you read it, and I don't remember now how many actual Hebrew words are in there, but it's an exact number. Words are spelled in certain ways.
It's the same amount of men that came out of Egypt.
Pardon?
It's the number of men that came out of Egypt.
Right. 600,000?
640,000, 600 something thousand.
Yeah.
There's like one letter per every man, I think, over the age of 20.
There's a specific number. Now, but the point is here that you may see a word spelt in Hebrew one way, and then a few verses later, chapters later, books later, you may see it spelled a different way. It's missing a letter. Or a letter may be spelled, when you actually read it as parchment, the Torah, some letters are made all of a sudden bigger than all the rest, or some very smaller than all the rest. Every single thing has a meaning. Everything has a meaning. There's not one redundant thing or one thing that doesn't mean something in Torah. Why? Because God is using it, he's very concise in his words. And when we read it, we're not supposed to think or rate or say, well, I read it this way or that way. Now, okay, I'm saying that. If anybody's ever read any midrash on the Torah, this rabbi says this, and this rabbi says this, and this rabbi says that. Well, we never say this story is right and this story is wrong. Because these gentlemen that have studied God's word and were reading their midrash, and even today, if I sit down and do a drash or a midrash on what I got out of a particular Torah portion, as long as I'm following Torah and putting, here's a look at it that I see through my eyes, it's okay, it's not wrong. As long as every word I write follows Torah and I'm not going against Torah, it's not wrong. Well, how can that be? 10 different people have different ways, 10 different stories. How can that be? Well, we don't know exactly what God's thinking, and until something is actually proven wrong, we just accept it. This scholar says this, and this one says this, and this one says this. And in many cases, the scholars are saying the same thing if you look at them to bring them together. They're just saying it in different words so somebody else can understand it a little differently. We've all had teachers and professors that we couldn't understand a word they're saying. And you go to another professor in the same subject, and wow, all of a sudden I understand it. Because one professor, neither one of them are wrong. One professor is speaking one way that your brain can comprehend what he's saying, and the other one, I call it being geeky sometimes. If you ever dealt with a computer technician or an internet person on the phone, they start using words you're saying, what are you talking about? What's going on here? Because anybody that knows a subject, any subject, can get what I call, and I'm going to use this as a derogatory, they can get geeky. What does that mean? I can start talking about Torah and using all kinds of words that you guys won't understand, but I know them and I know what their technical meanings are. And if I use those words to you, because I know Hebrew, you're not going to understand. One of the biggest complaints I hear from a lot of people is, man, I listened to this rabbi for an hour and he used so much Hebrew, I didn't understand a word he said. But the reason he's speaking in the Hebrew is because he understands it's best using that particular word in Hebrew. There is no word for it in English.
Yeah.
You can listen to another rabbi who takes those words and he can somehow express it better. And example, let's take Albert Einstein. And he's going to come to a junior high school class and teach mathematics. Albert Einstein, or anybody that's up at that level, has this huge knowledge in their head. It's absolutely humongous, and they understand things in a much different way than we'll ever be able to understand it. But if he wants to communicate it to a 7th grade math student, he's got to take all that knowledge, compress it down, and bring it down to the level of the people you're talking to. This is how all creation is, but we'll get that at another time. But you have to bring everything you have down to a level that the person you're giving it to can receive it. Because if you don't, you're wasting that person's time and your time. Just because I'm a smart guy, I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about a way of thinking, doesn't mean I have to show that person how smart I am. I've got this knowledge, I don't have to show them all my knowledge. I see posts out there, I see people teaching out there that they're teaching from their level of knowledge, and I start reading them or I start listening to them, and I got to turn them off. Simply, I can't follow the way they're doing things in certain subjects and in certain levels. There's a book called the Tanya that we use in Chabad. Wonderful, wonderful book. It explains a lot of things. But Dora says she loves Tanya. The thing here is, the first time I read it, I didn't understand a word of it. I didn't know what they were talking about. I was just trying to just take the words in my head. The second time I read it, now I'm talking about reading, not even studying, just reading. The second time I read it, I started to understand a little bit, and then I decided to get involved in classes, starting with kindergarten, first grade, second grade, of Tanya classes. I'm into my fourth go-round in it, and I've got one Tanya class that is pretty much at what I call an intermediate level, and I go to one twice a week. It's a huge advanced class, which I don't understand everything, but I go to the intermediate level because that I'm pretty much trying to get a handle on. You can never understand all of anything. The minute you say understand, you're making a mistake. First of all, you're locking yourself out from learning more. And second of all, there's a proverb that says, the person that thinks they're wise is the biggest fool of all. Because you stop learning. So how do we study Torah? And this is so important because it's so hard. I mean, I found it hard. When I really began studying, getting into study, it was always, yeah, I heard it this way, I read it this way, or I think this, or I think that, thinking that what I think means something in this universe. Well, what we think in front of the universe is about important as what an ant thinks in front of what it's doing. Our opinion doesn't mean anything. Our thinking doesn't really mean anything on the subject of God and what he wants us to do and how he wants us to be a human being. We have a free choice to do it, don't do it. Do it your own way, hey, that's up to you. But God says, this is the way I want you to do it, and this gives you life, and the other gives you death. So we simply, it's a cleansing in the head. And when you start to think, and I had to do this personally myself, been there, done that, okay? So what I'm talking about, I've been there, done that. I'd be reading something or somebody would be teaching me something, and I'd say, wait a minute, that's not what I read, that's not what I think, that's not what I understood. Now I can hang on to what I think and what I understand, or I can allow new knowledge and new understanding to come into me. I can put up a wall and just let, or put a filter up and only let the things I want to come through because this is what I think. And when we were talking beforehand, this came up about this issue of the ger thing. You know, the issue of the ger thing is not necessarily wrong, what's being talked about out there. What's wrong is making an issue out of it. What's wrong is telling people you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to do that. This is what this means, and this is what that means. That's wrong. When you go and study what it is, in the end, whether there's this whole big thing about ger toshav and ger tzedek and ger this and ger that, it doesn't make any difference. The thing that makes a huge difference in every single human being, including myself, is to be righteous. That righteous doesn't mean, well, look how good I am, I'm a great guy. Righteous means doing things the way God wants them done. Whether you're a righteous, and there are very few righteous Jews. If you go through the Torah, how many people are called righteous in all of the Torah? You got Noah, who's righteous in his generation, and God that credited Abraham's faithful practice of doing what he was as righteousness. And actually, that verse in the Torah can be read two different ways. Here's how Torah understanding goes. The verse, and I don't have it right in front of me, and we can get into a detailed discussion if you want. It says there that he considered him righteous because of his faithfulness. He considered him. Okay? So let's put in instead of the first T, God considered Abraham righteous because of his faithfulness. Now let's change the verse. The first T, Abraham considered God righteous because of his faithfulness and the way he treated him. That one verse has two different ways to look at it. Neither one of them is wrong.
No, that's Torah.
That's Torah. And when you or I would read it, we wouldn't think And right away, we're going to think God, because in the previous sentence, it talks about God, and then it says he and him. And it does that a lot in Torah. And so the sages, the people that know, the smart people, and when I say smart, I mean the big guys that have all the studying, they say we can read it two ways. Abraham said God was righteous because God was faithful to Abraham. In other words, God faithfully did the things he told Abraham he was going to do. Or God could say Abraham's righteous because Abraham faithfully did the things I told him to do. So what is righteousness? Righteousness is simply doing to the best you can what God wants, not what you think, not what you interpret, not what you decide you're going to do. This is so important in life that every time you look at another human being, you realize you're looking at an image of your maker. Now, I'm not talking about a physical image. I'm talking about he created us in his image, meaning the spiritual part of us, the soul part of us, the godly part of us. Our bodies are just vehicles to carry out what we got to do. It also has a soul, the animal soul. We've talked about this before. That's where the I think, it's my opinion, I'm right, you're wrong. This is the wrong way to do it. And the minute you hear someone talk negatively about a rabbi or a teacher or a sage, or Rambam got it wrong, or Ramban got it wrong, or Rabbi Akiva got it wrong, the minute you hear them talk like that, they're so far off God's path, it's unbelievable. We're not allowed to do that.
No, so that's as an example, what you're saying, it violates Jewish law, and that's why there's specific halakha, like we have a book that's damaged that contains Hashem's name in it, and it's a kosher book. There's a proper way of burying it, a way of doing away with, however you want to put it. We don't destroy it because of God's name. And
we don't throw it in the trash or something.
We don't throw it in the trash. It's a proper way of disposing of it. That's the word I was looking for. When it's beyond use. And the rabbi that was teaching me Hebrew, he was teaching me these laws, and it was like saying that we're not permitted to change the words of the prophets to fit our agenda. And that's why, and I'm just going to tell you what he told me. He says that's why a conservative procedure is not kosher. He said you can throw it in the trash just like you can another religious item, because they changed the words of the prophet to fit their theology. And he says, therefore, it's not kosher. And so,
that's true.
And so he, not him, but what you're saying is though we can't change the words of Hashem to fit us, whether it be the 5 books of Torah or the prophets and the writings. We have to take.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But now you've opened up, a new subject. We have the Torah and the prophets and the writings, and then we have what we call the Rabbanan, the things that the rabbis, and when they talk about the rabbis, they're not talking about the rabbis you guys know on the street every day and the ones on the internet. We're talking about the Rishonim and the Achronim, the first guys and the middle guys and the last guys, and we're talking about like Ha'ari and all the really huge spiritual guys that left us all these books to read. They show us how to do what God wants, and everything you mentioned was rabbinical. How we dispose of a book, how we're not supposed to write God's name, we're supposed to put G-D. How we, instead of saying, God's name is compromised to 4 letters. Now, I can't say them in order unless I take the second letter, which is a hey, and I change the pronunciation. I say Yud, K, Vav, K. Now, I have not spelled out God's name, but everybody knows what it means. Instead of an H, it's a K, okay? But those four letters have very, very spiritual significances in the way they're written. And not only are they each letters, but each of those letters are they have parts of another, they have more than one part to them. The first yud, which is this little teeny straight line, is not really a little teeny straight line. It starts with a dot. And from the dot comes out another line. The other letters are made up of other letters. All the letters are made up of combining certain things that have certain meanings. But this is getting way off topic. But this is how detailed God does things. He's detailed in everything, and the last thing he is redundant.
Right, but you're not really off topic, because here's the reason why I say that. This class here, whether we get into the details or not, because we got plenty of time, weeks and months if we need to. We want to start with not only just the source of where the 7 laws are, but also how they're derived, because there's some of the laws are directly given, but then some are derived in the way it's taught in some of our other Noahide books, right. God's relationship with man. Well, to understand how a commandment or a mitzvah is derived when it's not directly given comes back to the point you're talking about right now, understanding where the Hebrew's coming from.
Right.
So it's not really off topic. It's just you're the big A before the little a in the dot system.
There you go. We're going to get into what really technically Torah is, what God made it for, how he made it. We're not going to do that tonight. What I want everybody to do that hears this tape, and maybe, Terry, you might be able to turn it into a blog, I don't know. When you're reading God's word, don't think, just learn. It's that simple. Let the words come into your head, because that's what they're made to do. They're God's words. They're coming in there to change you, to make you a better person, to make you that righteous among the nations.
Right. And I'll be honest with you, I'm learning to change that in myself. I'm a thinker. I'll read, sometimes I can read a word in the Torah and dude, I'm off a week just thinking about it.
Now that's not thinking, that's meditation. That's a different thing.
Well, I know, but what I'm trying to get to is this. You're saying just read through, don't think it through first. And it's like I'm reading this book right now real slow.
Oh wow, yeah.
And it goes through the attributes of Hashem, and so I'll read something and I'm going, oh, now my mind's going off and thinking, and your voice comes back. Read it first. Don't think through it. Read it first. So I'm forcing myself not to stop. I'm forcing myself to go to the next sentence, instead of start to read it first before I start thinking about it. And so what you're saying has been helping me, because it's, I'm a thinker, so it's easy for me to go way off into my own world, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I was in a class with a guy that we read some of the word and we talk about a couple of sentences, and then he'd ask a question and the teacher would say, hang on, the answer's in the next sentence. See, before you start letting your mind go running off, looking for answers and asking all of these questions, you got to read it first, because the question that came up in your mind may be answered in the next 6 words you read.
Right.
So there's no reason to take this detour and try to think things through. Now, I want to make a difference between thinking and meditation on God's word. In meditation, I'm using that only for, I don't know how to translate it. There's a word in Hebrew called hitbonenut.
That's hitbonenut is generally translated as well, the way Rabbi Arush and Rabbi, that I've read, it's translated as personal prayer. It's just It's personal. It's just whatever comes from your heart. And
That's itbonanut.
okay.
There's itbonanut means.
Oh, I didn't hear the end. The
Okay, itbonanut is looking into.
okay.
In other words, you read something, you want to think about it, you look into it. That's called itbonanut.
Okay, that's the first time I've heard that one.
Itbonanut is you're separating yourself. You're making yourself solitary so you can communicate with God. So there are two different things here. Itbonanut means taking yourself out of what's going on around you, sitting down, praying to God, and connecting to God. The other word with a B, itbonanut, is litbonen, to look into depth of what it is. And it's a different, and I hate to use the word meditation because meditation to me has a lot of negative connotations, the yin yang and all that kind of stuff. So we stay away from the word meditation because it takes you back to your Western way of thinking. So what we want to do is look into, in depth, what is being said. Rabbi Nachman teaches very much the itbonanut. Go out in the forest, raise your voice to God, yell if you want to, scream it out, get rid of your frustrations, cry out to God, pray. Go somewhere, sit down, turn music off, took your phone off, turn everything off, be alone with God and pray. That's itbonanut. Itbonanut is I can sit here in my office, I can open up a passage, and I can meditate, think about, look into that passage in the Bible.
That's kind of what my personality is, getting into, looking into something.
That we all have that. and it's always, I'm what I call a dot connector. I have all this stuff in my head I don't know what to do with. And all of a sudden I'll read a sentence in the Tanya or in some other instruction book, and all of a sudden these lines start coming out. This connects with this and this connects with that. Sometimes you make mistakes. That's why you look down into it, because some things happen automatically because that's the way we were brought up with the Western mindset. All the years that I taught people that were not Jewish about God, I never used the word Lord. Ever. Why? I call it a trigger word. The minute I use that word, the people I'm talking to think, oh, he thinks like I do. We all know what that word means outside of Judaism, what it means.
Talking about so-and-so.
Yeah, right, exactly. Many, many words I took out of my vocabulary when I talk to people, because you can't talk to somebody unless you keep speaking the same language. And if you use what I call trigger words, they automatically start a way of thinking, and they're gone. You can't talk to them after that. Oh, he's saying the same thing my pastor said, or he's saying the same, he thinks the same way I do. You can't do that. So as you talk to people, and you are expressing where you are today, just try to make sure you don't use those trigger words. Call God God, and don't use Lord. And it's not because he's not. It's because it triggers a bad thought in someone else's mind. They say, "Oh, this person thinks just like I do." The Lord heals everybody. We pray to the Lord for everything. They're thinking one way and you're talking something else. So you have to be very, very careful of your thinking. I know it sounds a little bit of nitpickiness, but what God wants is us to pull people towards him without divisions. I'm going to go back to this Ger thing for a minute. There's some people or a couple of people being very vocal about certain rabbis in the Ger movement and this and that and the other thing. But all those people are doing is proving that my way is right and your way is wrong. The minute somebody starts that, close your ears. Don't listen. There's a reason you don't want to listen. Hello, David.
Hey, David.
There's a reason for that. The worst thing that can happen, and we talked to this tonight, I was at a beautiful wedding, put a small clip up on my Facebook page. But one of the things that we talked about there is at that wedding, we had Sfaradi, Ashkenazi, we had Vishnitz, we had Chabad, we had all these different types of Judaism all came together to celebrate a wonderful day, a blessing to Hatan B'Kala, the bride and the groom, and be happy with them together. And we all danced together, and we all sang together, and we all enjoyed being Jewish together. This is how God wants us to be as human beings. Enjoy being a human being together. Okay, you guys over there, Israel, you got your ways that you have to do for God. And okay, you guys over here that are not Israel or that are non-Jewish people or the nations, the 70 nations, you have your things from Torah that God wants you to do. Doesn't put a separation. It doesn't make anybody a second-class citizen. It doesn't put anybody over anybody else. But God did separate into teachers and learners. Now, this is another thing about studying Torah. And I'm not trying to being negative about anybody, because there's some good teachers out there that are not Jewish. They're not from Israel. They're few and far between, but there's some good teachers out there. God, and you've all read it, made Israel the light to the nations. What does it mean? It means here, show the rest of the world who I am and what I want from everybody. And when you have someone come in and say, well, who is not Israel, and say how wrong Israel is, or I understand it this way, or I understand it that way, so what do we need Israel for? They're not teaching us right. Walk away from people like that. Do not, absolutely do not listen to them, because you're going to get caught up in this division thing. Now, you know, within Israel, we have different levels of what is kosher and what symbols people use and things like this. And they're like divisions, but they aren't divisions. This is all kosher. And if you were brought up to use a circle O or UK or Badatz Madrin or Bet Yosef, that's okay. It's all kosher. It's what you're used to. It's a custom that is done in your particular little section. They're not, we don't fight each other over it. We don't say you're wrong for doing this and you're wrong for doing that. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. When we, Israel, come and say, look, we just want to teach you. Somebody put a post in the other day about, what do you think, this teacher's Rabbi Akiva or something? What is, it's the simple, I don't want to be derogatory. It's not the way to look at it, though. That's the only way I can say. You don't have to learn from a Rabbi Akiva. You don't have to learn from a Moses. You don't have to learn from, you know, the greatest scholars of all times. You have people that spend their lives just talking about this, whether they're called rabbi and they have an actual smicha in something. Nobody's got a smicha in teaching non-Jews. They have smicha in halakha, in the way we walk, and in kashrut, and meat and milk, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, here, you know.
But what you want is a learned person. Pardon?
Here's the way I hear people talk like that. Zechariah 8:23. What does it say? This is why we need to see the Hebrew. It says that those of the nations will grab the hem of the garment of Yehuda. It doesn't say a rabbi, sage, or anything. It says a Yehuda.
A simple person.
A Jew, to me, a person of Judah, regardless of your plaque on the wall. As long as you're living and teaching Torah according to halakha, it doesn't matter what the plaque on the wall says.
No, that's true.
Or whether there is a plaque. Let me put it that way.
That's true.
Because I've got a
Look,
lot of friends.
you can talk to a lot of Jewish people who have studied. Not everybody is bothered to go through the examinations to get what we call smicha, or covering. That, okay, you've learned this, here's a certificate, you've learned this, and here's a certificate. There's nothing wrong with that. Within the Jewish community, that helps us know who to go talk to. That we have here in Tzfat, I think, my opinion now, I'm going to tell you my opinion, one of the greatest halakha scholars on this planet today. And his name is Goldstein. And you can, if you look up Shulchan Aruch Harav, he's written, I don't know how many books on it. He's a young guy. I think maybe he's hit 40. He must have. He's got 11 kids. He must be at least 40. And he's people that are learned around the world write him letters and ask him questions about it. I'm lucky he's a neighbor. I got a question, I just knock on his door and ask him. But he runs classes here, and there are public classes on the internet. He has classes for women, he has classes for men. The point is, he's an expert in what he's an expert in. He can find definitions for things. He gets what I call geeky, okay, which is good in halakha. But when you need a teacher, you want somebody, first of all, that isn't all the time saying, I think this, I think that this is right and this is wrong. The minute the guy says another rabbi is wrong or an interpretation of some sage is wrong, back away from him. Take in all the information you can get. And as you study, see, we're in the age of instant information and instant understanding, supposedly. But you can't get it with God's word. You can't get it with Torah. It builds on itself. Why do you think in schools you have kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade? In each level, you get a little more information. It builds and gives you a complete picture. Although we never get it complete, but we at least get a greater understanding to the best of our own ability. And not all of us can get to the same level of understanding, and it doesn't make any difference. We're all built differently. So that you may get to a different level of understanding. I don't want to call it higher, just a different level of understanding than a person sitting next to you. But everybody gets what he wants because God nourishes everybody and gives nourishment to everybody. Spiritually, I'm talking about now. So, and if you get into something that you really don't understand, back off and just start reading it again. But please, when you start to say, I think this or that, when you're studying God's word or anything about what we're teaching, say to yourself, wait a minute, I don't need to think, I just need to learn.
Right. That's the reason why that's the reason why I'm hoping we can get into how the sages derived those mitzvahs of the 7 laws that aren't specifically you shall not shed blood, you shall not eat from a limb from a living animal. And we have, mitzvahs that aren't directly stated in the Torah, but how the sages read the Torah and got that from it. Like it took me some time, and one of them was on Genesis 8:22. The first time I read it, it really upset me. And I just had to close my book, and I went off for about a month or two before I even come back to it. But it took me some time, like you're saying, sometimes you got to put it down, just read it. It took me some time to see how the sages got out of Genesis 8:22 what they got. And once I saw that, I can't now look at it and not see that.
That's exactly right. I see Veronica said, how do you spell Itbonanut? You can spell it any way you want, because you have to do it phonetically. In Hebrew, we don't do any good for me to tell you what it is, but you want to say something, David?
He says he doesn't have sound. Hold on, you're on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you there, David. There you go.
I do now.
Okay.
There you go. Okay. Did you want to say something, David?
And I can help with the Hebrew spelling.
Oh, yeah. Well, but when people ask how do you spell it in English, you spell it any way you want. As long as when you look at it, you can say it bonanut. Phonetics. That's all you got to use is phonetics. There's no right way. Look, I live in Sfat.
Yeah.
So if you look at the signs around Sfat, it's spelled Tzfat, Sfat. Then you have Safed, Safed. And I've seen many other different ways to spell it in English. What difference does it make? As long as you say Sfat, what difference does it make? You know? So, I mean, in Hebrew, it's real simple. It's 4 letters. So one of them happens to be a very hard letter to say, which is the tzaddik. But if you remember the Ritz crackers, Ritz, that TZ at the end, that's what a tzaddik is pronounced like most of the time. So spot is the way it's pronounced. If you Google it, actually, Veronica, it'll probably correct anything for you. Google's pretty good at that. You'll get something close to it. Actually, since I've been speaking Hebrew a lot of years, but I don't know how to spell all the words in Hebrew. And when I Google something in Hebrew, it always gives me a correction. As a matter of fact, sometimes if I leave my keyboard on Hebrew and type it in English, it gives me the Hebrew definitions. So Google's getting maybe too smart. But anyway, back to our discussion. Always remember that the Torah is never, ever, 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 ever redundant.
Amen.
If someone says there's a redundancy here, I'm going to figure out why it's redundant. There's no such thing in the Torah. If something is mentioned twice, there's a reason for it. If there's something that's mentioned, a word that is stated twice in a row,
like
there's a reason. Now, what is the reason? Like in?
The 13 attributes. Hashem.
Yeah. The reason you and I aren't going to figure out, but we can sure read what Rashi has to say, what Rambam has to say, what Ramban has to say, what Hari has to say, what Rashbi has to say, and we can get some kind of understanding why God did this. But you and I are not going to sit down and say, let me think about this. Why is it redundant? What do I have to do here? Why would God be redundant? He isn't. You don't even have to ask the question. The Torah is a very exacting book. There's not one letter, nothing in there that has no reason to it. And that's what we have to understand. The Torah, the letters have meanings, but also the space between the letters have meaning. And when you see the Torah written out, there are parts of the Torah that are written a certain way. Their words are arranged differently in another way. There's reasons for everything. So it wasn't done just for, it looks prettier this way, or it looks nicer that way. There's explanation behind everything. So, and when you see the same word spelled differently different times, with a yud, without a yud, with a vav, without a vav, it's the same word, but there's a reason behind what it's doing. Now, people like to call it Torah codes. It codes, to me, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but it is God's way of talking to mankind. And he gives certain people the ability to look deeper into it. If we look at Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, 12 years in a cave, 14 years in a cave, studying and coming out of there in Ha'ari, 2.5 years he spent here in Sfat. And wow, the writings we have from him and the understanding and depth. I mean, if he was here for 15 years, we never would have understood anything past the first 2 years anyway. He was at a different level than we were. It's not putting anybody down, but not all of us have the capability in our mind to be able to get into some of these depths of things. So as we go through and explain the 7 laws, where they're from, When Terry first asked me to do it, I started sweating. I said, how can I do this? When I'm going to start teaching Talmud, let's see, Jerusalem Talmud, Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. What are we going to do here? And so Terry helped me put it together in a little better, different way, because it can get really complicated. And for me, I feel even trying to teach it is overcomplicated. We don't need it quite on that level. We just have to get to some of they're not even bottom lines because they're open bottom lines. Things can change in the future. They're going to change when the Messiah comes. They're going to change when we get fully into the Messianic era. Things are going to change, not in what we do or not in what God's commandments are, but our understanding is going to change. We're going to have a deeper understanding of things. We're going to understand better what Mayim Chaim means, the water of life. We're going to have a different understanding and understand that water just doesn't mean water. It means words, and it also means God's words, and it means a lot of things. Just our whole understanding will come in better. David, if you want to make any comments or anything, all you got to do is wave your hand or do something, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
I'm listening.
Okay, where are you located?
As of now, in New Jersey.
New Jersey. Very good. Now,
I grew up in Bnei Brak, though.
In Bnei Brak, all right. Did you know the Stissels? Do you know who they are, the Stissels? My wife loves that program. A lot of people love that TV series. They're putting the third year out now. It's not really, but a lot of people like it. You know, it gives a little insight. I want to.
It's quite authentic compared to other TV shows.
Pardon?
It's quite authentic compared to other TV shows that try to imitate this crowd.
No, that's true. That's for sure. Even though I don't think one of them is Harvey D and that the actors.
They're all actors, right?
Yeah, but they do a good job. Look,
Pesach, can I show an example of what you were talking about? The way the Torah is written. Some people may not know this.
Go ahead.
When you get into the Exodus story in the Hebrew, I'm going to try to hold this up in Exodus. Try to hold my Chumash up. I don't know if you can see how the Hebrew is written. It's kind of written like a brick format, that the water was like, stood up like bricks. I may be not telling that exactly correctly. But when you go back to Deuteronomy 32 and the retelling of it, you see how it's divided like a path, and that the water stood on walls. And that's what he was talking about, how Hashem had Moshe write these things down, and the way the Hebrew is on the page, whether you have the large letters, small letters, the divided words and stuff on the scroll, it has a meaning. Is that okay, Pesach?
Yeah, that's good. There's also, when you read it in Hebrew, if you have God's name on one side and God's name on another side and some words in between, it's like there's something special about those words in between two of God's names in that area. And there's a special way to look at it and read it, but we'll get into that. Like I said, we'll get into more of that later, but there's so much to learn. And we have to start with Aleph, with A. If you know a teacher that knows A and can teach it well, learn from him. If the teacher knows Aleph, Bet, A, B, and he knows it well, learn from him. Don't judge a person. Don't tell a person. I told one time a lady that was a couple that was very excited about learning about all this stuff. I said, you have to start from the beginning as if you know nothing. They took offense. I tried to explain to them, you have to learn, not think, not discuss, not rate. You just have to learn. Look, I'm one of these guys, I spent a good portion of my life thinking about God's word. And I've told you guys before, I was one of these, I grew up a Jew, I was bar mitzvahed, I was born, I was in what we would call a reformed household in America. And what was my mantra? Them black hats ain't gonna tell me how to live my life. Thinking that what I understood, that the rabbis and the people that had made these decisions were trying to use a power of control over me. Until I understood it wasn't them at all. They were just sent as teachers. That Hashem, that God wanted me to do these things. That's when I really got serious about studying and learning about God. And that's what made me choser b'tshuva. It made me come back to being a real Jew. And I'm still learning. Every day I learn. Every day I learn something new. It's not like, okay, here it is, clickety-click, I'm on the track, and you can't do this, you can't do that. I learn every day.
Can I
go ahead.
Can I ask you a question based on what you just said? You know, you were at a place.
Sure.
You were at a place where you didn't want the black hats to tell you what to do. Okay, and you had to come to a place to understand that it was what God wanted you to do. Well, we run into the same thing.
Right.
The rabbis made up the 7 laws. They're just telling us what to do because we're not Jewish, and so that's one of our hurdles in trying to teach the 7 laws. And so
yeah, I agree with you.
How did you come to the point to know that it wasn't what the rabbis wanted you to do, but it was what God wanted you to do?
What was the exact point? I can't tell you, other than when I started studying and reading, I realized they're just trying to keep me on the path that God wants me to be on. I just held up a book, The Divine Code. This is a great, Rabbi Moshe Weiner is good. There's been a lot of research on this. It's very good, but this just tells you what to do. This tells you, well, it's written here, so you do this. It's written here, and you do that. There's 2 ways. You can study this whole thing in an intellectual way. And when you study it in an intellectual way, you're missing the greatest part of the teachings. Because there's the spiritual way. If you just use your intellect, you can learn anything. Somebody can study Torah for years and years and years and be a total genius in Torah. In halakha, you can be a genius in halakha. But that doesn't mean anything if he doesn't have the spiritual connection and the, what we call kavanah, the intent that he's doing this for God, not for himself. And when I realized, and those of you that know my story know something very, I call it weird about me, but it was back in the 70s when I first really prayed and asked God for something as a Jew. And he did it. And I trusted him all my life. I didn't come choser b'tshuva until 5 years ago. And I'm 74 now. So it was a long time ago. But I always trusted him in everything I did. It's really, really interesting. So I hope David's going to come back and join us back. I was hoping he would have some things to say about what I'm talking about.
He was probably on his phone. I think he has trouble sometimes with his phone connecting.
Okay. But what is this whole discussion about? Let's put a few little guidelines up. You want to learn about how to connect to the God of Israel, and that's what he calls himself, the God of Israel. Then you want to learn from Israel. If you're going to learn from Israel, you want to have someone that isn't teaching you a divisive way of learning. In other words, he's going to say to you, this is the way it's got to be, and if it's not this way, you're wrong, and this rabbi over here is wrong, and this rabbi over here is wrong. They're still stuck in a Western mindset. You need to learn from somebody who's going to tell you, here's what God says, what you do with it is your business. they're going to lead you down the proper path. And if someone says, believe this way or hit the road, hit the road. You don't need them telling you that. What you need people doing is giving you information so that light will grow brighter in you. And that godly part of you will get stronger and stronger and stronger. My wife told me that one of her friends who got married this week met a guy, and it was months before she knew what he looked like. And she went out with him, and she talked to him, and she went places, to shul with him and stuff like that. My wife says, what do you mean? She said, because what I was looking at was his godly soul. I wasn't paying attention to what he looked like on the outside. That's what we need to pay attention to, the God part. She says, when I looked at him and saw him physically, he was shorter than me, and this and that, the other thing, but it didn't make any difference to me. I was in love with his godly soul. What a beautiful statement that woman made.
Wow.
It doesn't make any difference the outside. What makes is inside. And when you have it inside of you, you can hook up with it with somebody else. As we sit here and talk and learn and discuss every week, what do you think? It's me and you, and it's the godly part of us connecting together. We're one. We're a unit. We're a community. We're one with God and one with each other. And as you look at each face on the screen here, or if somebody's looking from outside, what are you looking at? You're looking at the image of God. Each one of us, and everybody you look at when you get on the bus, when you're driving down the highway, you go into a restaurant, you're looking at God, the image of God. And that person is no different than you. All of us are in the image of God. So if you insult somebody, excuse me, you get mad at somebody, you're getting mad at God. Think about it. Now, I've been mad at God in my life. I've shook my fist at him, and I've yelled and screamed sometimes, like Rabbi Nachman tells you to do. But you're looking at God. If I offend another human being, I'm offending God. We're all one. We're all part of the same God. And he's a part of us. And this is what the 7 universal laws, we call them, the 7 laws that God gave to Moses to teach to all mankind. Understand this, all mankind, the same 7. Why? Because this makes us part of the unit, of the one. Now, he gave the Jews, the Israelites, more to do because he wanted to make sure that what he put here on earth didn't disappear, that the human beings would still communicate it one to another. And we've been around. You want to say something, Angela?
I'm good. I'm good. I have to go right now.
Okay.
Bless you.
The 17th, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does somebody else have their hand up? Okay. I lost my train of thought. Anybody remember where I was? We're all one. That's the main thing. God gave us a few more things to do. Why? He's using us as teachers. Now we pray every day that we get brought back from our exile. From the 4 corners of the earth, we're brought back to Israel, and the exile ends, and we move into the Messianic times. And when we read the Torah and we see things that happened, or we read history even, the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Persians and the Romans, the Greeks and the Romans, and all these people that persecuted the Jews and sent us out into exile around the world, and then we read it as God punished us and sent us out because we weren't being proper. But when you understand that Torah is God's plan anyway, this was going to happen. He knows who human beings are. He knew it was going to happen. And he sent us out as little lights all over the world. Everybody knows what a Chabad house is. They're all over the world. They're little lights everywhere. Even where there are places where there are no Jews, there's a Chabad house. That's what he did to the Jewish people and to Israel. Why? So there'd be little pockets of light all over. Sometimes the light got a little bright. People came in and snuffed it out because they didn't want it around. You know, I heard a good explanation about that, and I put it up. I think I posted it in B'nai Noah Connection with Israel about anti-Semitism. One of the main reasons the world is just an automatic hatred of us is because when someone looks at us, they realize they're missing something that we have. There's something in them that's empty. A part of them that's calling out. Because these guys have it. But so if we get rid of them, we won't miss it in ourselves anymore. Everybody will be equal. Get rid of the Jews, will be equal. That's why every generation somebody's trying to kill us all. They look at it like, okay, I don't want any mosquitoes around. Let me make sure there's no water where they can breathe in, right? They're trying to snuff the light out, God's light. And they can't because God takes care of his light. But he wants you to have it and every single human being to have that light lit in you. Right now, I got a little light in me. Each one of you has a little light. But when we're on screen together, the light's much brighter. There's an old there's a couple of old Christian songs, or maybe not Christians, country western. One of them's "This is a light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine," and stuff like that. That's what you got to do, and to really make it shine in the proper way, you just have to. What stokes the fire in you? That is what you put in you spiritually. Makes your light brighter and burn brighter. During Hanukkah, it talks about the oil for the lamps, for the menorah. And they had to send somebody all the way up to the Galilee and bring it back. But the light, the oil, the last pure oil they found lasted 8 days. Why was it important to have this pure oil there? All of us are souls that we keep filled with oil. Oil is our beliefs, what we do, how we act. And there's a wick in all of us that lights up, and the oil burns in connection with to God. All he has to do is look at your light and know what kind of oil you're using. And the more you purify the oil by what you take in and what you do for God and how you help him, the less smoke there is in your light, the clearer it is, the brighter it is. But you're in charge of that. You're in charge of the quality of oil that goes into the lamp, which is you. And if you ever go look close at a candle burning, you have the oil, which you put in you. You have the wick, which is you. Just above it, there's a black spot. The flame doesn't start just above the wick or just above the oil. There's a little black spot, and then the flame goes up. And no matter how you turn it, the flame always goes up that direction. Because if you've ever been to a bonfire, a big one, like in college days, or you go in Lag BaOmer to a bonfire, and you have a torch in your hand that's burning, the closer you get to the bonfire, you'll see the flame starts heading towards the bonfire. That fire, the bigger flame is pulling the lesser flame. But they always want to go up, never down. They want to go back to their source, but they want to do it together as one. And that's what we're supposed to do. And the more understanding you have of God's word, the more you learn about it in the proper fashion, the more you push out your opinion, your thinking on it, the clearer the oil gets, the brighter your flame gets, the less smoke there is. And it attracts other people that have little smaller flames.
That's
because
really interesting.
Pardon?
That's really interesting because I don't have the book now. It was one of them I gave the rabbi when I decided to not convert. But I used to have some of the Art Scroll books on the Mishnah. And I think it was Mishnah Shabbos that I had that talked about the halakha of making a wick and the materials that were permitted to make wicks and things because of the odors, the smokes, the different things. And I read that. It's funny because it's bringing me back to this part that I read when I was studying the Mishnah. Now I'm beginning to understand what I read. I don't even have the book now. I just remember what I read about the halakha of making wicks in the book on Mishnah. And now I understand. I couldn't understand it then. I'm like, what is it? What's all this got to do with this? You know, and by what you were talking about just now, helped me understand something that I read 7-8 years ago.
Let me tell you that every single thing that you read or think about has two sides to it. It has the physical and it has the spiritual, just like we do. It has the fleshly side and it has the spiritual side. And every single thing, there's a connection between the two. So something to be learned there. Just like you said, you read a book 7-8 years ago about the halakha on making a candle and what wicks you can use, what oil you can use.
Right.
That's the reason they sent somebody up at the oil purer. There's different olives in the Galilee than they had down near Jerusalem. They went where the new harvest was, where they were getting the finest, purest oil at that particular time of year, and it was coming from the Galilee. I don't know if you know that you buy oil, you say it says virgin, extra virgin, cold press, hot press on the bottle. The best olive oil you can ever have and use, and the smoothest and the tastiest, is the oil that comes out before we touch it. When they pile those olives into that tank that they put them in so they can start doing what they got to do, as soon as they start putting them in, they pile up on top of each other. There's an oil that comes out. The purest oil that you can possibly get. I don't even think you can buy it in stores anymore except in selected places because it's so expensive. Most of the olive oils we buy are not 100% pure. And they're mixtures of different levels of pressing. Cold press is better than a hot press. And all of that is before it's ground to make more oil. The more you grind it, the more impurities it has in it in the end. God wants us to purify the oil that goes into that we use to keep our candle lit, our light lit for Him. He wants us to purify it the best way we can. How do we do that? By learning. How do we learn? By not thinking about what we're reading. Now, I don't mean be dummies, but you know what I mean. Let it sink into you. Let it go into you. Don't rate it. Don't opinionate it. Don't say, I think this or that. Just let it go into you. It's almost like a medicine. It's almost like, God forbid you should be in the hospital. But you go in the hospital and they give you these intravenous lines. Some of it's just water and salt water and stuff to keep you alive. And every once in a while they put some medicine in to get you better. Now, you're not Your body doesn't say, wait a minute, let me check this out. Let me see what's going on. Let's see what you're, wait a minute, I don't think you give me this. I think you give me that. Now, our heads might say that, but our bodies don't. They accept it. And in most of the cases, people recover and get better. God forbid that anything should happen to anybody. But I'm just using it as an example. If you just allow the Word of God to come inside of you, it makes things better. Even at times when you think you're at the worst of times, it's still going to make it better. When people say, I'm worthless, I was born in sin, I'm far away from God, they just haven't understood yet they're closer to God than a lot of other people. And God doesn't turn his back on anybody. He takes care of all of his creations. All that other stuff is in our head. That's our fleshly part telling us, no, you can't have a hookup with God because you're such a sinner. Original sin. Oh, you were born a sinner. You can't even prove that in the Tanakh. You can't prove original sin. Because everything God created, he said was good. Anyway, that's enough of that, comparing those two things. So just a quick sum up of what we talked about. First of all, you can't rate the information that comes into your head. That's why we just can't rate it. We just have to accept it in and let it see what it does within us, how it helps us. Don't wall it off. Don't stop it up. Don't get focused on one particular thing. Just let it come in. If you're learning from someone who's trying to teach you that's divisiveness, or that is putting down other rabbis, other scholars, or even say they're going to reinterpret what Rambam says, or the Rashbi says, or that Rashi says, say, okay, go ahead, but without me. Just walk away from it. You don't even have to have an opinion of it. Just walk away from it. You don't have to say this guy's bad. He's not, just walk away from negativity. Divisiveness. We're not supposed to be caught up in divisiveness. We just have to understand that everything we need to know, or ever wanted to know, is right there in the Torah, and you can go as deep as you want into it. There's no limits what you can learn other than your own personal limits. Everybody has a limit where they've gotten to where things start sounding, wait a minute, I can't quite understand this or whatever. When I get there, I say, wait a minute, let's back up. Let's go back and do a double check here to make sure I got everything in order. Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Am I fixing myself? We get all worked up over save the world. Look what everybody else is doing wrong. This one says global warming. This one says global cooling. This one says this. This one says that. And that's fine. They can say all they want. But the fixing of the world doesn't start. It starts right here inside of you. Right here in your heart. You have to admit that you need fixing. And every time you get mad at somebody for something they do or say, why do you get angry? Because it pushes a button in you. There's something in you about that situation, about that thinking, that you have to fix in yourself first. When you get into this situation, you have to realize this is a mirror I'm looking into. So if I'm upset about that person and what they're saying and doing, maybe there's something in me I have to change. And I can't remember where I got the quote from, but it's from one of the rabbis or one of the scholars, or maybe even from the sayings of the fathers. But if you rebuke somebody, what does it mean by to rebuke? You can't rebuke anybody unless they're a friend, by the way. You can't just, but we'll get into that later. When you rebuke somebody and don't pay attention, they don't listen, it's because you're saying things with the wrong intention. You're not saying them from your heart. You're not saying them from brother to brother, from understanding to understanding. You're just accusing them of things. And of course, they're going to backfire on you. There's no reason for anybody to not accept what you have to say unless you're not saying it the proper way to them. It's not their fault. And I've been praying for years to God about something very specific. I call it a key. I say to him, God, give me the key that will unlock people's hearts and minds. Give me the words I can say. Give me something so I can, when I speak to people, it's going to have an immediate effect on them. Never gotten it, obviously. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not Rashbi. I'm not Rashi. I'm not one of the big scholars. And after years of praying, I realized that was my ego praying. As much as I thought I wanted it in my heart, it was my ego praying. I wanted to be the guy that was going to be able to say something, and boy, bing, people would understand right away, and they'd change their ways. And I was asking you with the wrong intent. When I realized that every day when I learn, every day when I pray, every day when I get up in the morning, he's giving me the key. What I do with it during the day is up to me. Whether I stay connected to him or not during the day, it's still up to me.
So you're saying that, I'm going back to the quote you're talking about, and actually the statement you said about it. When it comes to rebuke, you only rebuke a friend, someone that you have a personal relationship with. Is that correct?
Yes, but there's two definitions to what I just said.
Because I have a reason why I ask.
Okay. Let me give you both definitions of what I said. One of them can be somebody you grew up with, your lifelong buddy. It could be a new friend, a new person you've gained a relationship with. It can be that way. But it can also be the guy you just met 5 minutes ago. It can be someone you bump into on the street. You have to look at them as if they are your friend. You have to open your heart to them. You have to love them so that you say things in a proper manner to them. God wants us to communicate with everybody through this kindness and the way we look at them. Because the minute you look at someone and say that they're your friend, you love them as a human being, no matter how bad they are, no matter how much grief they brought into your life, the minute you do that and you're thinking with the proper intent, it goes into the godly part of you, which goes into the godly part of them. A connection is made. What was your question, Terry?
Well, the reason why I'm asking the question is this. Again, you've really opened up a lot of things for me tonight. I think sometimes, and I include myself in my own writings and my blogs and my aspirations of what I feel like I'm trying to do, is I think sometimes we're writing. I'm talking about the Noahides. When we're wanting the world and our friends and our family to see the 7 laws, maybe we are approaching it in a rebuking format as, you're wrong, you got to wake up, and that's not the correct way. And the way you explain that makes me want to maybe really look at how I write about a specific subject when I'm speaking to non-Jewish people, and not come off like you're saying you're either, I never say somebody you're wrong. That's not correct either. But there's ways that sometimes we approach trying to teach the Noahide laws and with an underlining rebuke attitude, and that's the reason why it's not being heard. Like you just said, you rebuke your friend or whatever, and they didn't hear what you said because it was your approach or the words you used or something. And to me, that's opening up this whole issue of trying to teach the Noahide laws to non-Jewish people. We've made our friends can't hear it. The world can't hear it. It's probably because the way we're approaching it. And that's what I got out of what you said.
You're exactly right, but it's not your fault. This is the way we're taught to think. Somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong? Oh, come on, wait till I get back to them. You know, they stop hearing what you're saying and go right into defense mode. So they're not listening. They're thinking, what am I going to say next? They're thinking. They're not taking in information. I mentioned earlier about trigger words. The way you say things can trigger certain things in people. Now, there are times when you can yell at people, and there are times when you should just speak softly with them. And the more that you can do it, the soft approach, in other words, think out in advance, if you can, how to present it to them that, look, here's another way of looking at stuff. Maybe take a peek at it.
It's just some ideas for that new blog I'm wanting to write to reach, the family and friends that don't understand why their loved ones are keeping the 7 laws, or why neighbors, or why the community. It's given me some thoughts. Okay, this is how I need to approach this direction.
Good. I always enjoy your blogs anyway. They're so good. So good. Looking forward to the next one, actually. So remember, when you go to learn, I hate to say it this way, but turn off your brain. When I say turn off the brain, turn off the fleshly part of the brain. Remember, there's two parts of you, the spiritual and the fleshly or animal part. The animal part will try to convince you what the spiritual has to say doesn't mean anything. The spiritual side is going to convince you what the animal side has to say has a place, but let's think it through. It doesn't tell you the animal side is wrong. It says, let's harness the power of that side and use it for the godly side.
Right.
The fleshly side of you is saying, no way, Jose. Look, you're good enough. You don't need to do anything else. You're pious enough. You've learned enough. You can think this way if you want. It's always patting you on the back, telling you what a good guy you are. So think about it, and as soon as you're reading something, written from a Jewish side, don't throw it out. And if you have a teacher that's telling you this is no good and this is good and this is no good and this is good, if they're especially, and I'm sorry I have to say this, but if they're not of Israel, natural born Israel, when I say natural born Israel, that includes converts. People actually convert. You want to learn from them. Now, I'm not saying, Terry's an excellent teacher. He takes words, and I'm so grateful to God that he takes some of the things I teach and puts it in words that I can't say, but he can. He's learned, because he did so much studying in Yiddishkeit and stuff, that he can take and do that little gap, bridge that gap that I can't bridge. But if you start, and there are Noahide groups out there that will not allow a Jew close to them. And there are other people that say, what, just because you're Jewish, you think you're better than me and you know better? Who do you think you are, Rabbi Akiva? Those are silly statements for people to make. God made us a communication device to light up your light so that you can have a direct communication with him. Didn't make us, we're not special. We're not rated higher than anybody else. We're a same human being created in his image as the whole world is. He gave us a little more information. And he gave us a way of protecting that information so it doesn't get chopped into pieces, cannibalized, opinionated. You know, I read an article, and I don't remember, I was on the internet, about how many times this book that the Christians used was edited. And some guy did a thesis on it for his doctorate. There's like 400 and some thousand edits were done in that book. If you want to know how many times the Torah was edited and revised and changed, Google it. The Torah scroll that you see us hold up today is essentially the same Torah scroll that Moses wrote in Mount Sinai. Because we have learned people checking what is written. We have learned people making sure that it doesn't get edited. You know, there's a story about, I think it was the Greeks, maybe it was the Romans. Age is getting to me. They took a bunch of Torah scholars and were translating it into Greek, I think, maybe. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, Terry. It might have been Latin. And the person that was paying for the translation said, lock everybody in a room, feed them, let everybody do their translation. And then I want to see all the translations when they come out. I think it was some amazing number, 70, 80, 90. And when he got them and he started comparing them, he calls in his people and says, I told you people not to let them talk to each other, not to let them discuss this thing. And they said, well, we didn't. They didn't have any communication with one another. This is why every single one says the same thing. I think it's called the Septuagint. That's where it came from.
That's what I said. I think it's Septuagint.
Now, wait a minute. You put 70 people in a room and tell them to translate it from Hebrew or Aramaic, they all had the same one, into a different language, and all the translations come out identical. And you know what? Even the greatest miracle of all, there were certain passages that were translated in a particular way just so as to confuse people a little bit. And every single one of the scholars had it exactly identical. There was no difference in wording from one to the other translation. What does this tell us? That our Creator, our God, our King, our Father wanted it to be done this way. The scholars didn't say, wait a minute, let me edit this so it means this, or let me put another meaning to it so people will think this instead of that. They didn't do that.
Scotty has
When you read, pardon?
Scotty has his hand raised.
Oh, no, he said no. Okay.
No, Scotty.
Oh, Scotty, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Scotty.
Well, and on, but everything you've talked about tonight, I've got so many notes. I'm going to be studying and reading for a week. But I just feel like elaborating on something that you said that really touched my heart. The part where, and I'm going to say it from my viewpoint, and I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. You know, in the book of Psalms, chapter 1, I think it talks about, in his Torah doth he meditate. And I think last week, you used the word soliloquy. I think that was you that used it, Pesach. And it means to, I know y'all, it means to talk to yourself. And my grandmother used to tell me that meant to daydream. And so when I study the text, I mean, I can study the text and study the text, and I can put it in me. But when I get the most out of it is when I'm daydreaming about it. I'm just just talking to myself about it, and I get the most depth out of it. And I wonder, why didn't I get that when I was studying it? But when I started daydreaming about the text of the Torah, not only did I get a deeper understanding, but I also got an understanding on how to relate it to other people without them getting that block, using those. You talking about there's certain words, and I've seen it. We go out on the weekend and catch folk handing out tracts and things on the streets, and I found out the best way to approach them and bring up a conversation is the things that Hashem showed me when I was meditating about the text. So anyway, I wanted to throw that in.
I think that is great, Scotty, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but I'm going to say now, and this isn't a criticism, but as soon as you said the word daydream, see, my definition of daydream is different than your definition of daydream. The word daydream acted as a trigger word for me. That's what I used to do when I was in school, and I was so bored to death that I didn't know what was going. I didn't want to hear what the teacher was saying, and I just look out the window and go on this little flight of imagination. So this is what we got to be careful, and it's okay because I understood. But certain words, when you use them, push a person to think a certain way.
I understand.
Yeah. So no, and what you're using is daydream. I would say it's itbonanut, or looking deeper into. Same thing. Meditation, same thing. Although it's so, in English, it's so hooked up with so many weird stuff. I hate using it.
Yeah, I kind of understand kind of where Scotty's coming from, because I've said before, I'm a thinker. My wife will walk in the living room and she'll see me just staring off into space and goes, "Okay, what are you thinking about now?" And so I kind of have a daydream effect too. I'm sitting there and in my mind's eye, I'm looking at the words, I'm thinking of the words and how this is, and how, just like what Scotty said. I guess I understand what he's saying, daydream, because it's like you're looking out into space. You're not looking at nothing, but you're in yourself. Is that a good way to say that, Scott? You're just kind of
talking to yourself. Yeah, talking to yourself. Yeah.
Actually, it's a good way. Sometimes I'll be walking along and I'll be looking at something, and all of a sudden I'll just stop, and it's almost like my wife says, "You look like you're just frozen, and why do you got your mouth open?" Because I'll just stand there and like this, kind of with my mouth half open. And at those moments when that happens, that's what I'm doing. I'm thinking about something that just was so intense I had to stop everything else and listen at that time. And you get to an age, you don't care what people think when they look at you. So if you stop in the middle of the street and look kind of silly, that's okay. What difference it make? But and Scotty, as soon as you started explaining what you meant by daydreamers, I understood 100%. Of course, that's we all do that. That's a good way of putting it. But most people, what your parents say, stop daydreaming. Go do this, go do that. So it has to do with the intent behind the word, and sometimes you have to explain the intent. But that's a great way of putting it. I like that way of putting it. It's daydreaming. Yeah, it is. It's daydreaming. So I think, unless there's any other questions, I'm looking at my little list of things I want to talk about here. Look, do yourselves a favor. If you get a teacher that's getting too geeky about something and you feel that way, it's okay. But if you need to find a different teacher, find it. If they're not a Rabbi Akiva or they're not Hari, but they're just a simple person wishing to transfer some information to you, they're okay too to learn from. The whole key is continue learning and going forward. Don't anybody tell you learned enough, or wait a minute, the Jews are teaching it this way, but I think it's this way. Don't get involved in denominationalism. That's That's why it says, don't start another religion. Just one quick story, and then we're going to leave, I guess. Yeah, I've got about an hour. I can rest, and I got to go somewhere. But there's a certain town in Ohio where one of my daughters lived. And there was one street in town for 3 blocks. If you weren't going to church, you can go close to that street on Sunday. One church after another church after another. Just it was church highway, 3 blocks of it. And they had somebody at the entranceway to each parking lot. And so if the parking lot at one church was full and somebody's going to come around and use a different parking lot, the guy would say, wait a minute, you don't go to our church. You can't park here. And then they would go, and there was a lot of on-street parking. And I was there having a meeting with some Christian pastors, and I asked a question. I said, why is it that everybody's got a building here? Nobody lets the other person use the parking lot. Nobody has communication. This one's good, this one's bad. There must have been 15 or 20 churches in 3 blocks. And one of the guys, I said, why don't you just have a take everybody to a stadium every 6 weeks or every 6 months, and just all you guys get together and talk to them there in the stadium, bring people together instead of dividing them. One guy looked right up at me and says, you know what? If this pastor over here preaches to them, and then they might go and join his church. They might join this church or that church. And that was what was blocking the unity. At my front door, all I have to do is go down 7 steps. I have 1, 2, 3 houses of prayer, different ones, Sephardi and Yemenite and Vishnitz, Ashkenazi. At my back door, across the other side of the street, I have 4. People look at it as denominationalism. Well, but it's not. Each one has the people came from a certain country around the world. They have a mother tongue they speak in common, and they all say the same prayers in each house. If I get up in the morning and I don't want to go all the way up into the city to the Chabad place to pray, I go out my front door and say, okay, which one am I going to go to this morning? It doesn't make any difference what the name is on the outside. We're all saying the same exact words inside. There's no difference. Chabad may say an extra couple of psalms, stuff like that, but we're all saying in prayer the identical same thing. Tonight at the wedding, just as the wedding was getting underway, it was time for afternoon prayer. So the guy on the microphone says, okay, it's time for afternoon prayer. Every male in the place just stopped, faced Jerusalem, and we all prayed together, every one of us, and it was all identical. When it came for evening prayer, same thing happened. One guy gets up and starts reading out loud, and everybody else follows along. Everybody carries their own, everybody has their own afternoon and evening prayer book that they carry with them all the time, because you never know where you're going to get caught, and you're supposed to pray it 3 times a day. But it didn't make any difference whether it's Sephardic or whatever it is, that people on the outside look at it as denominations and splits. It's not. It's just different communities. It's like this one over here speaks English, this one speaks French, this one might speak Arabic because they're from Yemen. One might speak Portuguese, one might speak Spanish. And people are comfortable as their mother tongue talking with people in their mother tongue, or people that came from the same place they came from. When it comes to prayer time, it's all the same. It isn't, this is more right than this, or this is wrong and that's right. And that's what people don't understand when they look at what they call the divisions in us. There are no divisions.
No, yeah.
Comes to God, we're all the same. We're all the same. We all study the same exact thing. And I might this week be reading Baba Sali, or next week Abu Hatzera, and the week after that, Rabbi Schneerson. They say it in different ways, but they all say the same thing. That's all.
I had the exact same experience when I was associate pastor.
Yeah.
We had our district meetings. In our district, we had 10 churches, and they were all the same denomination. And so at one of our district meetings, I asked them, I said, well, we're 10 small churches in this district. We're all the same denomination. So we wasn't different denominations. We were the same denomination. I said, why aren't we getting together and playing ball and having potlucks and doing this? And I mean, they all looked at me like, are you freaking crazy? Because people over here is going to like this pastor. They like how they do it here and how they do. Oh, no, we got to keep our own members. And we were within the same denomination, and they wouldn't come together. So,
Wow.
I wish.
So anyway, if you get a hold, if you get someone that's teaching this is right and this is wrong, or somebody protesting too much that what they're teaching is all right, and other people say it's wrong, it's not good. Anybody that brings this stuff up into the public light, anybody that brings division, anybody that puts down another teacher, anybody that puts down any of the Hebrew sages, you want to walk away from them. If they can't connect to Israel, you don't want anything part to do with them. And especially if they can teach it better than Israel, and they can reinterpret our sages into the way they want, walk away from them. Now, why am I telling you this? You guys are here and you're with me, and I really appreciate. I'm just a simple guy trying to do a job that's pretty difficult. But you're going to run into people out there that you're going to need these words for. I'm not telling you these to tell you, but you may need these words to tell somebody. Especially when you start seeing some posts that people are allowing to be put up in their Noahide groups that have no reason to be there. Absolutely no reason to be there. Now, there's a group that takes care of people for conversion that when they first sent me their thing that they wanted to post it in B'nai Noach Connection Israel, I said, well, we're not evangelizing. We're not telling people they convert. It took me 3 weeks to decide whether to put it in there or not. In the end, I said, well, you know what? Somebody may be looking for this information. But I didn't want to put it up because I thought someone might think we're pushing that information, which we're not. We're simply helping people understand as much as we can, and we don't have all knowledge. Only one has all knowledge. Only one has all the information. We're a part of him, he's a part of us, and we can only understand what we can understand. So we're just trying to help people, and that's when I give you guys information sometimes, it's just so that hopefully you can use it in your daily life when you talk to people. Hopefully it'll make your light burn brighter when it needs to burn. And remember, the brighter you can keep your light, the more pure oil you use, and the brighter your light becomes. Someone whose light is produced by impure oil or not as pure oil, that little light's going to want to join with your bigger light. Just like the torch wants to join a big bonfire. Just like our sages want nothing more than to be one with God. And one of the Rebbe's used to say, I don't want anything else. I don't want to be in Gan Eden. I don't want anything. I don't want to be in the Garden of Eden. I just want to be with you, God. And I always used to say, this sage is saying all he wants to do is return to God. Well, does he lose his identity? Does he become one with God? How does he even know what happens? This is how my mind works. And it took me a couple of years of studying to understand what this guy was saying. It's pretty interesting. I don't want to get into it right now. I keep saying that about subjects, but if we get off into tangents, we can talk here for 6 hours. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Look, you guys, I really, really appreciate you guys joining with us. I appreciate the work you're doing every day in your life when you talk to people you work with, when you interact with people. Believe me, I know that the knowledge you're putting in your head is going out to people. And that's all we can do. And I appreciate you guys very much. And I appreciate the work you do. And if anybody wants to have any private talks with me, just let me know. We can do it through Facebook. And if you have a question you don't want to ask on the air, I'll be more than happy to answer it. We can hook up on Facebook and talk about it or whatever. Doesn't have to be on Zoom. I want to bless all you guys. I want to tell you that I know Hashem is watching. God is watching what we're doing. I know that He approves of it because all we're doing is His word. We're not trying to change it, edit it, or do anything else to it. And I know that every time we get together for a little meeting, there's something that adds to your flame so that you can then add to somebody else's flame. Coming from that purer olive oil inside of you. See you next week. And see if you can't get some other people to join in with us. And they don't have to stay for the 2 hours. I know we kind of got used to it. We kind of like it, but they don't have to stay for the 2 hours. They can always catch it up on the videos we do. So until next week, good night, folks. God bless you all.
Good night.